Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Brakahakwadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you, sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure to the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Edom. And the biblical Edomites today are known as these so-called white people, these Americans, British, Europeans, Russians, etc., etc., and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And that least of the flock is also talking about Edomites of the tribe of Amalek over in the Holy Land right now, calling themselves Israelis. They're not the true children of the Most High. They're imposters. The true children of Israel are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And as it says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Those 1948ers, as I'll refer to them as in the rest of the video, are going to do something to instigate a war against Iran, which is going to draw in nations like the U.S. and these other NATO countries in on the side of the 1948ers, and on the side of Iran, it's going to draw in their allies like Russia and China, and it's going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, in Joel chapter 3. And I opened up the video with this verse to preface an article on the JerusalemPost.com to show that the least of the flock is working on doing what they can to draw out these other nations down in to the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And the title of the article is Israel, U.S. to hold air drill simulating striking Iran nuclear program. The drill, one of the largest Israeli Air Force drills in years, will include long-range flights such as those that 1948er pilots might need to make in order to reach Iran. And earlier this year, the 1948ers did a military drill called Chariots of Fire, which involved all branches of their military simulating attacks against Iran and their allied forces in that Middle Eastern region. The 1948er Air Force this week will hold one of its largest drills in years, with the United States Air Force simulating offensive strikes against Iran's nuclear program. The drill will take place from Tuesday until Thursday over the Mediterranean Sea and Israel. It will include long-range flights such as those that 1948er pilots might need, really will need, to make in order to reach the Islamic Republic. And this article was published on November 28th of this year. The exercise will include refuelers as well as fighter jets from both air forces. And also this year, the U.S. was involved in drills simulating these very same actions, U.S. refuelers being used to help 1948er fighter jets do long-range missions against targets in Iran. Washington and Israel have signed an agreement that would see the U.S. come to assist the 1948ers with missile defense in times of war, and the two militaries have held numerous joint air defense exercises in recent years. So again, here's an example of the least of the flock getting ready to draw these major nations down into that Middle Eastern region for that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. But now, I'm going to go to Joel chapter 2, verse 20. But I will remove far off from you the northern army, and that's speaking of the North American army, the United States military, all branches, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, that Middle Eastern region, with his face toward the East Sea and his hinder part toward the utmost sea. And when we go to a map of the Middle East, you have Saudi Arabia right here, which has a presence of U.S. military personnel in it, and it's going to be the main staging ground for this upcoming battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And as it said back in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, with his face toward the East Sea, and what do you have? The Persian Gulf, and to the northeast, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Iraq, where the U.S. also has a military presence. And on top of the Persian Sea, to the east, what? Iran, the main target of the 1948ers and the United States in the Middle Eastern region. And where it said his hindermost part to the and his backside to the Slovakia, and his hinder part toward the utmost sea, that's speaking of behind him, to the Red Sea. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he had done great things. And this is just another verse to show that these heathen nations' militaries are going to be gathered down into that Middle Eastern region for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. One of the main players is going to be that Northern Army, the United States military. And as we're reading in that article on the Jerusalem Post, they're doing drills with the 1948ers, the least of the flock, to simulate attacks against Iran's nuclear structures as well as other targets. Hey, we can clearly see that biblical prophecy is quickly coming to pass. And where it said, and his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, there's going to be a great slaughter of U.S. military personnel as well as other heathen nations as militaries that are gathered down into that Middle Eastern region, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, for the War of Armageddon. Tensions between Israel and Iran remain high. Iran, which possesses over 1,000 short and medium-range ballistic missiles, continues to smuggle weapons to countries and non-state actors such as Hezbollah, which is estimated to have an arsenal of some 50,000 missiles on Israel's northern border. With tensions high over Iran's nuclear program and regional hostility, Israel and the Islamic Republic have been threatening each other, with senior officers stating that their militaries are capable of striking the other. The 1948ers has significantly increased their readiness level and has taken steps throughout the past year to prepare a credible military option against Iran's nuclear facilities. The NIS $58 billion defense budget set for the IDF, or the 1948er Defense Force, in the coming year is expected to allow the 1948er military to focus on the threats posed by Iran across the region, with some NIS $3.5 billion designated specifically for this. The upcoming drill was discussed by IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Aviv Kohavi during his visit to Washington last week. Kohavi, who returned to Israel a day earlier than planned following a deadly double bombing in Jerusalem, met with senior American officials, including Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley and SITCOM Commander General Michael Kurilla. In the last year, the IDF and SITCOM forces have held several joint drills as well as operational missions. Kurilla was in Israel a week prior to Kohavi's visit and toured the northern border, as well as the IAF's fleet of F-35 Adir stealth fighter jets. We are operating together on all fronts to gather intelligence, neutralize threats, and prepare for various scenarios in either one or multiple arenas, Kohavi said during Kurilla's visit, adding that the two countries were developing joint military capabilities at an accelerated rate against Iran and other threats in the Middle East. Again, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. The U.S. and the 1948ers doing joint military drills simulating attacks against Iranian infrastructure, which of course would provoke a war against Iran. And then in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, I will remove far off from you the northern army into a land barren and desolate. The U.S. military heavily involved in that Middle Eastern region, Kohavi said during Kurilla's visit, adding that the two countries, the least of the flock and the Northern Army, were developing joint military capabilities at an accelerated rate against Iran and other threats in the Middle East, that land barren and desolate. Outgoing Defense Minister Benny Gantz told reporters at the beginning of the month that while the 1948ers have the capabilities to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, Prime Minister-designate Benjamin Netanyahu must consider the issue carefully before giving the order. Israel has the ability to act in Iran. We have the readiness, development capabilities, and long-term plans we are managing. We need to prepare for this possibility, and we will also need to consider this issue very carefully before carrying it out, he said. According to Gantz, the option to strike Iran should be prepared, and this issue should also be considered very carefully before implementation. But regardless, it will happen because it's all a part of biblical prophecy. As it says in Isaiah 55, verse 11, so shall my words be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please. So with this article. But now, I'm going to go to Joel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 9. Because all these different actions taking place in the Middle East are going to lead ultimately to this battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, that war of Armageddon. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles, and that's exactly what the true men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers that come in the spirit of GMS are doing, by going out onto the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this online, proclaiming among the heathen Gentiles to prepare for war with Iran, World War III, the battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, nuclear war, the war of Armageddon. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And that article that we just read from showed that the mighty men are being woken up and being prepared for war to come up. The U.S. and the 1948ers holding joint military exercises simulating attacks against Iran. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. The 1948ers, the United States, Russia, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, these other NATO nations, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of the Most High, holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which is mainly going to happen after the mandatory implementation of the MARKOFTHEBEAST in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, which is the RFID/NFC MICROCHIPIMPLANT, regardless of what anybody else, like Captain Tazariak of the ISUPK says. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shaphat, which means Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And when you go up to the first couple of verses of this chapter, you'll see why these heathen nations are ultimately being gathered down into the valley of Jehoshaphat to be judged by the Most High for afflicting the apple of his eye, the children of Israel, who are again known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And at the top of that list, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83, are you Edomites. You did the most, especially you Amalekite Edomites, in afflicting the children of Israel. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And when we read articles like that, we can clearly see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.